Let's go to our panel. David Gazzard, he's the DPG Advisory Director, former Liberal advisor, and Ben Oquist, Executive Director at the Australia Institute, former advisor to the Greens. David, this is crunch time. It's crunch time for the Prime Minister and for the Coalition, and there's a lot at stake, not just on the climate front, but for the politics of where the government's at right now in the election just around the corner, David.
Yeah, my sense is that, the community has moved on. It's taken some years to get to where we're at the moment. And I was thinking about this in the lead up to coming on the program after having gone through a lot of the machinations around the introduction of the GST, which similarly sort of took 20, 25 years to go through all those policy machinations that led up to that. A bit of a tortuous process to get there. I think the Australian public do take some time to get to the point where they're willing to accept some of these big reforms, and this is one of them. But I think it's important to note that the government's gone through a very exhaustive process within. It will take any program that it announces before Glasgow to the party room of both the National Party and the Liberal Party, and to Cabinet, to really sort of thrash through the finer details of it to make sure that it works in the interests of Australia. And they've thought through all of the bigger issues that have proved to be problematic in the past, and have seen the loss at elections of a number of different governments that have tried it, and tried it in ways that haven't been acceptable to the community.
Ben, what's your thinking on this? If there is a deal, and it remains an if, because we've seen this movie before where policies look like they're rock solid, some even legislated and they fall over. So we keep that caveat in place. But if they do get that net zero by 2050 and there is bipartisanship on that front, have we reached an important milestone in this country, Ben?
Well, you would think we would have, but the substance matters of the deal, and I think there will be one. I think this week's looking a bit messy for the Prime Minister. I don't think he want it going on too long. A couple of days is okay. David's right, though. Big reforms take a while, and the community will put up with some. But a couple of days looks sloppy. A week probably looks pretty messy. And I don't think he'll want it going into another week. His authority will start to wither a bit if he's left another sitting week without a deal. So I think there will be one, Sunday or Monday or something is a speculation now. But the substance matters of the deal, doesn't it? Glasgow's all about the action that we take this decade, not in 2050. And what's being discussed now, the front, if you read the front page of the paper, is the Nationals want a coal-fired power station left on the table. There's a deal for a coal train as part of the Inland Rail. The Prime Minister's boasting about record levels of gas production. No lift in the 2030 target at all. So if we summarise it, we're going to have a net zero target that means more money for coal, more money for a coal-fired power plant left on the table, the opening of the Adani mine in the huge Galilee basin, dodgy offset credits, record levels of gas extraction. The Prime Minister actually boasting about that in the chamber yesterday. And not only no lift in the 2030 target, but seemingly a deal that guarantees it can't be lifted. It's kind of developing into worse than a fraud. It's a farce, and it won't be a deal that can be welcomed as any genuine attempt to tackle climate change. And I think when the rubber hits the road, people will see that, and they'll see it in Glasgow, and the Prime Minister won't get away with it.
Well, David, the Prime Minister has had, and the government has had, a different view on previous efforts to reduce emissions. This time, I guess you alluded to this earlier, I think, a shift not just in public sentiment but in the broader debate around this, from the Business Council of Australia to the New South Wales government, with quite aggressive and ambitious reduction goals. How does that change the political equation?
I think it does it because it enables the country to reach those targets without causing the sort of massive upheaval that Ben and the Greens would really like to see. So you can appeal in those regional areas where they depend on mining jobs, where they depend on gas. And whether you like it or not, those are commodities and those are businesses that are going to keep going. We need them in a transition sense. And we need a lot of the minerals that are going to be produced. So this is where the National Party has every right to be prosecuting its case, and the Liberal Party are listening to the National Party and consulting with them. They don't want to get this package wrong. And the challenge will be for the Labor Party on the other side of this to seek to win the seats in those areas that it needs. So Ben and the Greens will seek to drag them way further to the left on this. You've got Joel Fitzgibbon out there who really has defined the political debate for the future election around this. And Labor can't afford to get too far out of step with those communities it wants to represent in regional Australia, where it has virtually no seats. So this is the debate we needed to have in the lead up to this to assure Australians that they're not going to lose their jobs, their industries aren't going out backwards, and there's a way forward that is coupled with technology that will allow us to get to net zero by 2050.
Ben, you could understand why Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen might be a bit reticent about going too hard on a midterm target. They agree on the 2050. And isn't there some truth to what the Prime Minister, well, you know, there are others that agree with him, like Bill Gates, for example, when he says that it's not linear, that it doesn't all happen in the early years. It's a lot of technology that has its impact later in that period towards 2050, Ben.
Of course, but actually, if we leave all the action to 2050, the planet will be cooked already. It's not linear. We've got to take more aggressive action now. And, you know, for all the BCA's faults, it's put out a report saying it's much better to take aggressive action now. And I know David likes to think that everything the Prime Minister does is spot on, but it's not in this regard. The world's moved on and it's demanding action this decade. There's just been this big UN global production report out today that finds that if all the oil and gas that countries are projected to produce, like Australia, oil, gas and coal are projected to produce, it'll be double the amount that would otherwise meet the Paris target of 1.5 degrees. So more action is going to have to be taken. This isn't kind of fantasy. This isn't kind of some green ideology. This is what the science is telling us we need to do to save the planet to reach 1.5 degrees. And
gentlemen,
I think that's the reality.
Apologies, I've got to wrap it up. We're out of time, but great to see you both. David, Ben, we'll see.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.